Today, we have all gathered at this arena to believe and build by choice and think by our minds. Meeting of Minds is not just a platform to exchange ideas, but it is also about planning your first step towards execution for something that you truly care for. On this very note, let me share with you what is it that we have in store for all of you. We have 3 exciting sessions lined up in which our distinguished guests from various walks of life would participate. We will kick off with session 1, Young India, Proudly Indian Global Vision, in a few minutes from now. Then post-lunch we have session Young India Empowerment. And the last session will be dedicated to the hot and happening topic in our country, Young India Fighting Corruption.
In this session, our eminent speakers, along with enthusiastic students, will join us to explore answers to questions such as, what does being Indian mean to you? Has the perception about being Indian changed in the last 10 years? Is globalization really desirable? And if yes, how do we make youth locally embedded with the global vision? We shall discuss this for an hour, and post that it will lead to splitting into subgroups with one speaker each as a facilitator of that group. So that means in all we would have 6 subgroups. Each subgroup shall then discuss whatever they are moved to do to make a difference, because it is very important to take actions after such a thought-provoking discussion. So to discuss this topic, we have our eminent guests, Mr. Rustam Singh Gupta, the founder of BOOND, an organization aimed at solving some of the biggest global challenges of adequate lighting, access to clean drinking water, and pest control affecting the remote areas of the world. Rustam has graduated from INSEAD with a burning desire to do something different and work for developing those less fortunate than himself. He has been a banker, a consultant, and a researcher and worked in 5 countries across the globe. Mr. Sachin Batra, Managing Director, REIT with Religare Investment Advisory. Mr. Batra obtained his MBA degree with a university honours from Tepper School of Business at Carnegie Mellon University and a bachelor's degree in electronic engineering from the University of Pune. Under his leadership, his team is responsible for structuring the product offerings, devising, proposing, and implementing investment strategies. Currently, his team manages real estate assets of $500 million. Ms. Meenu Chopra, the Executive Founding Director at iCongo. She has been responsible for shaping the mission and vision of iCongo and has developed and conceptualized some cutting-edge ideas for campaigning and building citizen social responsibility. She has also been integrally involved in organizing the regional and national Ladli Media Awards for gender sensitivity with UNFPA. Mr. Anand Sachdev, the founder and CEO of the School of Inspired Leadership. He has been an adjunct faculty to leading business schools such as the Indian School of Business, Kelley School of Business, Indiana University, GMI, Flint, Michigan, and many others. He is active in the management circles and has held several public offices such as the Chairman of National Committee on Industrial Relations and Regional Committee on Human Resource Development of Confederation of Indian Industry. Mr. Sachdev serves as the trustee of the Chinmay Mission, an inspiring not-for-profit institution, and the Charities Aid Foundation, a global NGO. After completing his MBA from the University of Pune, he joined Tata Motors and then Eicher Group in 1978. He then became the founder CEO of Eicher Consultancy Services. He later founded Grow Talent, the leading player in education and HR consulting.
We also have with us Mr. Chayantar Singh Rathore, who is a student at St. Stephen's College. He is a Khemka Scholar at Global Education and Leadership Foundation, an avid reader, debater, and theatre enthusiast. He believes that while India is walking the tightrope between becoming a superpower and fighting the inherent poverty, a uniquely Indian global vision can have the potential to build bridges across the fault lines of economic and social disparities. We also have with us moderator for our session, Mr. Charles Canero. Mr. Canero is the head of marketing for India and for Asia Pacific benefits for Towers Watson. He has over 15 years of experience in advertising, PR, brand management, and customer loyalty marketing. He created the first ever successful airline travel trade loyalty program while working for British Airways in 2002. He has received CNBC's Young Turk of the Year Award 2005, NRI's Special Contribution to Aviation Award, and 6 IAA awards for advertising. Charles is an MBA in marketing and has bachelor's in information systems. His hobbies range from playing keyboard for a rock band to having held top 50 world rankings in Scrabble and pool at different times in his life. Charles will be the moderator for this session. We take this opportunity to thank you. We are really looking forward to having an extremely engaging session. Charles, over to you.
So just a little bit about what I like about being here and this session. So number one, I like the words inspired leadership that's in the brand name of Soil. And the reason why is because when you think about what really drives the world today and what really makes things within corporate India, corporate globally, or within the NGOs or within anyone really, it's the inspiration that drives everyone else to follow. And if you look at the roots of what leadership as a concept is about, it's quite interesting because the ancient Scots used to say that a leader was a person who went out, looked out, scouted the area, and came back and they took his troops for an invasion or whatever was needed. And that's about taking a little bit of risk and being able to get people to follow you when no one has gone before. And I think it's quite good that you have a concept called meeting of minds for several reasons. One is, again, from listening to each of you when you were speaking this morning, there's a lot of ideas, there's a lot of innovation that's going on in the minds of the young people today, and also some of the not so young people like me. And it's important that we have a bit of an exchange and a balance between those ideas. So there is some direction, there is some experience that's added to that direction, and then we move forward in one direction and don't compete. Right now you've got a state where the generation gap, I was just talking to someone a week ago, how large do you think the generation gap is when you think of the generation gap? How many years would you say it is? 5 years? Okay. Yeah. So in my time, and I'm not that much older than all of you, although I started university maybe 20 years ago, it was, a generation was, your father and your mother, and then you. So you're talking a gap of about 20 years. About 2 decades later, it is now, I would say, about 3 to 4 years. I know siblings who have a gap of 3 years and they think much differently. I've seen 4-year-olds, and mind you, I'm single so I don't have any kids, but I've seen 4-year-olds in the neighborhood doing things that when I was 12, from a gadget perspective, I would never even thought I would be able to manage. They can disassemble and reassemble DVD players. They know how to operate iPods, and it's about 15 or 16 years before a lot of us managed to do that. So I think it's important for you to understand out there that you're not members of the audience. You're very much a part of this topic. We've had a fantastic, 20-year run since 1991. And if I'm honest, every time I keep asking some of the icons of Indian industry what has made India grow rapidly over the last 15 years, no one has a single answer. Yes, people say yes, 1991, the Narasimha Rao government and Manmohan Singh's reforms opened up India. But there are others that say, well, India was anyway there waiting to explode. They were just waiting for the catalyst, if you like. There are others like me who think when I was so I went to the US in 1991, and I was studying information systems. Guess what? I was studying COBOL for the weeding out course was COBOL, which is not used anymore. But you know why COBOL? Why? Because I was Indian. Because Y2K, in fact, some of you in the room may not even have heard of Y2K. How many of you have heard of Y2K? Okay, not bad. Older than I thought. Okay, so for some of the 15 and 16-year-olds, Y2K was this enormous scare, which was almost like Armageddon in the corporate world, purely because most of the huge enterprise computers that existed in the world were developed from designs in the 60s, when people never imagined that their life would be beyond the year 2000. So they had 2 digits in dates. So any time sequence would be 81, 82, 83, right up to 99, which means when the year 2000, 1st of Jan 2000 dawned, everything would be 0. But a lot of jobs were created because of that, and somehow I find that's forgotten. Because a lot of the whole outsourcing phenomenon really boomed because you needed COBOL programmers. And as someone who struggled through 4 different classes of weeding out COBOL, let me tell you, it's the most boring computer language ever invented. Indians were mathematically capable to be able to understand the logic behind it, and that I think is largely due to the school systems that we always find so much to criticize about. But we had the logical building that I found few other people that could understand that. While we might think of the British as colonists, we have to be thankful of the fact that the British did leave behind English, which helped us understand things a lot better than some of our counterparts in Asia Pacific. And it meant that we were able to get that business offshored into India. Apart from that, the fact that many of us as students or as academics were in other parts of the world, it helped us sell, I'm a branding person, it helped us sell the brand India as something that's more than just nice people who live in a country that got its independence in 1947, is nice to everyone in the world, very hospitable, great food. It changed that image to people who could actually make a difference in the corporate world. And thankfully, we've lived up to that promise that we promised the world to deliver, and we've been able to deliver quality service, and it's a service industry that's really driven growth. Just one thing that I'd like, before I open it to the panel, I'd just like to point out, if we are saying that India is going to continue, there is sustainable economic growth, maybe not in the double digits, but higher single digits for sure, then we must just accept the fact that we're in a leadership position in the world. And if we are in a leadership position in the world, with that leadership comes responsibility. And we've got to ask ourselves some very difficult questions. Are we being seen? Okay? Are we being seen as being responsible about our growth? Are we being seen as being responsible about society? And are we being seen as caring about the global context of things? So with that, I just kind of, I think, Anil, while reading the profile, it's been, I think you'll probably be able to add a lot to this panel from the experiences that you've had. But I've been told by your colleagues at SOIL that being the good host, you'd like to be last. And I think, Sachin, from a corporate perspective, I think you could kick it off probably like no one else can on this panel. So I think we'll probably lead up with Sachin and then go down for about 5 minutes per person.
All in all, I think I agree with what Charles said, is that, you know, we are at a point where world receives Indians with awe, and they kind of, there is element of fear that is coming in, because we've kind of conquered over markets and geographies in the work areas which was not imaginable about 10 years back. Especially in the field of finance where I come from, if you go to the world markets like London, Wall Street, Singapore, Hong Kong, Japan, Bombay, obviously, it's all ruled by Indians. 2 things that I think are the big strengths that Indians have. And obviously the rigor of the schooling system here that puts you into that logical, mathematical, and academics. Oh man, Indians love academics. They love to study. I mean, you know, our children are compared. Is your kid has 90%? Oh yes. If he doesn't have, probably he's not worth around to me. So, you know, we love academics. So that's another thing that about Indians is we love to go to school, we like to have our degrees around. And so that also helps. I think that's very, very positive. I think that's all, I think what Indians are all here about. So, thanks.
It's interesting, being Indian, I mean, I think Charles, you mentioned it very well, there's been a change in terms of the positives to being Indian, and I think Sunil mentioned it, Sachin mentioned it quite well too, in terms of the perception about being Indian. But I'd like to look forward and just bring up, being Indian is also being a part of a country which while it has all the IT and all the technology and the finance and the banking strength, also has a truckload of people who actually depend on people like you to take them somewhere. And that's huge. I mean, here you talk about entrepreneurship. The big difference for India compared to any other country in the West is you are handed down leadership in India. You are handed down entrepreneurship. And you have to. If there are 600 million people back in India who don't have the opportunity that you have. You can of course say that you've been great at academics, you've done stuff. But the reality of the fact is we just had 20 years of good run, fast-track development, which the West had for the last 200 years. So while we run in the rat race and while we try to prove our point, it's very important for us to really be what an Indian is. It's the simple guy who actually does what he's told or who actually creates value for wherever he goes to. So I think being Indian for me is being aware of what India is, what we stand for, and what exactly are we respected for. Because yesterday it was technology, today it will be finance, tomorrow it will be medicine or something else. The first thing you want to be respected for is who you are, kind of humility that you carry, the personality you carry, and what your word means to yourself. And that's pretty much what I wanted to say. Thank you.
Being Indian to me is being a part of a very rich cultural heritage, which is all about caring and sharing, all about a value system which we are known all over the world for. And while we are progressing, while we are being a part of the globalization, it's about retaining that value system and the cultural heritage with us. For me, being Indian is being a world-renowned leader like APJ Abdul Kalam and still being a people's president, being very caring for the people of India. It's being like attaining a certain level in life, being a youth leader and still removing your shoes while lighting a lamp. That's India for me. India is all about caring and sharing. Well, a vegetable vendor who doesn't have money to get her husband treated and loses her because of that sets up a hospital to give free medical treatment to all the people living in her area. That's India for me. When a small 12-year-old girl sells paintings that she draws up to support education for underprivileged people, that's India for me. And that's the message we should take out to the world while we go out and be when we go out and be known as the leaders of the world, as a superpower that's emerging. So the challenge lies in becoming empowered citizens, empowered people, empowered leaders who are equally responsible for the planet as well as the society, and then emerging as a superpower where while we progress, we take every section of the society with us. We include everybody in the progress that we make. So according to me, that's true globalization, and that's the thing that we need to do going ahead.
I guess we'll all agree that being Indian is also about being diverse and recognizing that diversity exists and being tolerant about that diversity. So with that thought, I'd love to get a student's perspective.
When we talk about stuff like Indian leadership, global world and vision, a day that inevitably comes, and as you mentioned, is 1991. I was born in 1982. So, whatever I have experienced is essentially the present you're talking about. And before adding anything, I would just like to raise some questions that might be obvious, that might be uncomfortable, but we need to think about it. When you're talking about something like a proudly Indian global vision, let's question what does being Indian mean? It might mean something different for every individual, but when we need a sort of definition to lead us to somewhere in a discussion, and I guess both Rustam and Nina put it quite well, that it is about the diversity, it is about what we experience, but at the same time there is a sense of drawing from a past that we had, and that is the vision for the future. Now, after that, let us question what is global for us, and I don't have answer to that. And then what sort of vision do we want? Do we want to grow in terms of GDP? Do we want to go towards and fight the inherent poverty and talk about welfare of the masses? Or do we want to export handicrafts made by a person in the village and get solar lamps, mosquito nets, and water filters or something? And it is only after that and after we are clear about what sort of vision do we want that we can lead the world. And I have major issues with people jumping about and saying, India, yeah, we can lead the world. I don't think so.
India's three biggest strengths today Youth, youth, youth. Three biggest trends. What does that mean? We are the youngest nation in the world. And here is some very interesting research done by a Harvard University professor and his wife all over the world. My generation is called baby boomers. Do you know what was the most important thing for people like me when we were growing up? What do you think was most important for us? Your parents, many of you, your parents. What was most important for your parents when we were growing up? When we were starting our career, what was our number one priority? To secure the future of our kids. My daughter who came out of the Vasant Valley school bus, my wife was waiting in the car, here is a change in dress, wear Bharatnatyam, go to Ganesh Natyalaya to learn Bharatnatyam. Here my son comes off from Mother's International School, and there he is waiting to go for my wife is there to take him to the coaching classes for his tennis. We wanted to give our kids the very best, right? And we were slogging our guts out 60 hours a week because we wanted to make sure our kids got the best thing. And then came my next generation of people who are in their late 30s. How many people here are late 30s, early 40s? How many people? Late 30s, early 40s, there are some of us. What do you think was most important to this generation, which is next to your parents? What do you think was most important to them? Anybody? All of a sudden, they started talking about work-life balance. Because they found people like me working our guts out, so they wanted more work-life balance. And what do you think is most important for your generation, which is being called Generation M, this research shows? What's the number one thing?
Secure a future.
That's, you're talking like a baby boomer.
Change.
What does the reason? To make a change, absolute. This generation, the number one thing that matters to you is to make a difference. You don't want to just talk about problems. You want to take responsibility for doing something. Do you know US Marine Corps, the ones who shot Osama bin Laden? Do you know what's the compulsory part of the US Marine Corps education today? The number one thing they teach them, those crack groups? Yoga and meditation. Do you know in Silicon Valley, in Cupertino and everywhere around, the Apple people, their kids, every Sunday there are more than 1,000 young kids who come together to learn meditation. Teenagers. They are understanding the power of the wisdom tradition because they said this makes you more aware. Once you are aware, you begin to deeply care. When you begin to care, then you care. So from aware to care to care. These are three beautiful steps. So I hope today's forum will help us to become more aware. I hope that we will take responsibility to truly care. When that happens, I am very sure your generation has huge potential. You will make this country show to the whole world that there is no Western way of consumption and self-centeredness. There is no Eastern way of sitting in the Himalayas and meditating, but there is a third way, which is using the wisdom to make sure the world becomes better. So thank you and welcome to Soil. I hope we have lots of fun.
It's fantastic hearing different perspectives, different viewpoints, and yet everything was resonating into the same thing, and that's the importance of the younger people around here, and people who are not so young working together to try and work towards responsible growth. So we'll be opening the floor, but I thought I'd just take the prerogative as a moderator and ask the first question. Something that just, when I heard the topic, something just came to my mind immediately. And I know there's a separate discussion on corruption at the end of the day, so I don't want this to lead into a corruption question. But what concerns me is about 5 or 6 years ago, a person who was then a prime minister, I won't mention the country, actually defended at a social organization, India, by saying, let's not all forget that India is the world's largest democracy and there's a price that you pay for democracy. You know, anyone from the panel can take this question, but what I'd like to know is from either a corporate standpoint or a social standpoint from the NGOs, are there any organizations that are doing their bit to try and educate the rural masses on the political influence and the political responsibility that they have from a voter's perspective to come and change the system?
I think it's kind of easier said than done, because the kind of sub-segment of the market or the society that you're talking about, I think voting is way out of their thought process. They're struggling to meet their 2 meals a day, putting clothes on their body, getting education, basic education, and you can just mold them the way that you want to by just on a very limited resources. So to my earlier question, is democracy, how is it panning out, and should we give that power to it? And I think that needs to be done.
There are some organizations, like in Rajasthan, in Devlumri, MKSS, which is Mazdoor Kisan Shakti Samiti, has been doing a lot of work where they make people aware of what their basic rights are. Because even before voting is one. What is their basic right and what are the basic duties? Like the first things that we study in class 7, 5th civics, like what are the rights, duties, and so these are some of the work they're doing. The good part that's coming in through youth is getting better ideas, like using technology. How can you do it with, bridging the gap of, the roads are bad, you can't get there, but that's a government responsibility, they're not going to do it for you. You can take an iPad over there, and you can put it up on a wall, and you can actually stream video, and actually tell them about what their rights and responsibilities are. So technology in a lot of cases helps to bridge that gap. And that is the part where India can do amazingly well. Because even before we had, phone connections in most homes, we had mobile connections. So that's a leap. And so for MKSS is one which is doing a great job. CARE in one of the organizations in South India, where in Nagapattinam and all, is doing a great job about awareness. And we've started this through our cell phone campaigns. It's just giving out people SMSs, just for them to know, like, okay, Anna Hazare is doing this great campaign. Most of the villages I was in, they didn't even know who Anna Hazare was. They just thought, forget about them. A lot of people in the road here selling the flags and the caps. They just thought it's a great day because there's some gentleman who's actually, on starving, and that sells a cap for 10 rupees, which was selling for 2 rupees.
It's the educated urban class which is scared of going out and giving votes. They are too apathetic. They just don't care. So that's one thing which we need to rectify, and it's not that we can go and educate them. It's that all of us have to, take that onus of educating ourselves, realizing our responsibilities towards nation building, and seeing how we can, then set up linkages with the rural India to make them more aware of the political scenario in the country, so that, as Rustam said, they don't hear it with the highest voice and go and vote for them, or they don't just count the blankets that are given to them and they go and vote for them. A lot of organizations are working in this scenario, and these are all local CBOs, community-based organizations in rural settings, which are being linked to. A lot of INGOs are working and supporting these NGOs.
Hi, I am Kshitij Bansal from National Law University, Punjab. I would connect her explanation to the earlier discussion we were having. Actually, we can have I'm getting to a common explanation. She was actually right that it's youth. I would ask, how many of us actually did vote in the last general elections? Very few of us. My generation is in a kind of cultural dilemma. On one hand, we are so proud when we stand on a stage and say unity in diversity, Bharatnatyam, dances, music. But let me ask you, I'll share one example. I am a trained semi-classical singer. When I went to my law school, people who were jamming on guitars with Western music had hundreds of people as crowds around their stage. When I was jamming one evening, in very first year, my seniors actually came up and dragged me. Why do you do this? This is pervertedness. What do you sing? Which language is this? And I was like, which country do you belong to? This is the cultural dilemma I'm talking about. When for the first time, on my freshers, I intentionally wore dhoti kurta. And I was invited on the stage, again dragged. Why? What are you wearing, Kshitij? Like, you are an intelligent, smart guy. What has happened to you? We are in a hyper state. The only difference why Chinese youth is much ahead in entrepreneurship and success is that, first of all, they establish upon their own cultural fundamentals, and then only they go global.
I think comparisons between youth in China and youth in India will never be at par, and it always bugs me when the comparisons are on that. If you don't mind, I'll just move on because I know some of the students. I'd like to hear from some of the students. So can we hear from, let's hear from some of the school students first. Can I have a volunteer? Anyone who kind of wants to tell us what their perspective of this topic is?
High school student.
Yeah, the high school students. Sorry.
My name is Nupur, and I just have a question. When you say that the educated class of India do not vote, they do not take voting seriously, what are the basic reasons behind it? Is it because you don't believe in the government, or is it because you don't really think the government can actually make a change?
My short answer to ask other people is I feel very strongly about it. I think they just think stupid. Yeah, I really think they just think stupid. You're in a democracy, you're in a country that you've got the right to vote, that several other countries around the world are fighting for. People are dying for their revolutions around it. You have that right and you ignore that right, and then you complain about the government all year. So I think you're just stupid. But sorry if I offended anyone.